What's up, everybody? Welcome to Neon Mushroom. Welcome back if you've been here before. Today we got some EDH / Commander gameplay, whatever you want to call it. And we've got 4 decks for you today. We have 2 you've seen one time before, so decks that have appeared on this channel once, and this is their second time. And then we've got 2 decks you guys have never seen on this channel before. So that's pretty exciting. Let's not talk about it too much preemptively. Let's just go take a look at who's going to be playing what deck and what some opening hands look like. Alright, first up we've got Guy bringing a new deck to the channel. It's going to be his $200 budget Kadena Slinking Sorcerer deck. He keeps a 7-card hand with a Command Tower, a Forest, Lifecrafter's Bestiary, Annox Survivalist, Willbender, Dulcet Sirens, and a copy of Primordial Mists. I'll be playing my Dragonlord Ojutai Voltron deck. I will also be keeping a 7-card hand, including Manama, School at Water's Edge, Skycloud Expanse, Island, Teleria West, an Ancient Tomb, Swansong, and everybody's favorite Sol Ring. Then we have Iden returning with the second appearance of his Jhoira Weatherlight Captain deck. He keeps a 7-card hand with Wooded Foothills, Sulphur Falls, Pact of Negation, Aetherflux Reservoir, Foundry Inspector, Phyrexian Walker, and a copy of Helm of Awakening. And then Jake's got our second brand new deck to the channel. It's going to be Xyris, the Writhing Storm. He also keeps a 7-card hand with Firelit Thicket, Alchemist Refuge, Breeding Pool, Counterspell, Farseek, Magus of the Wheel, and In the Web of War. I win the die roll, so I'm going to lead on Island into that Sol Ring, passing to Iden. He'll draw for turn, and he's going to play a copy of Wooded Foothills and pass over to Jake. Jake's just got a tap Breeding Pool, and then Guy's going to draw. He's going to drop a copy of Command Tower and pass to me. I'll untap and draw my card for turn, and then I'm going to play a Skycloud Expanse as my land for turn. I'm going to use the Skycloud to filter for blue, and I'm going to transmute Teleria West for a copy of Chrome Mox and add that to my hand. Before I can pass to Iden, he's going to crack his Wooded Foothills, go get a copy of Steam Vents into play tapped, and after he's finished with that, he'll untap, draw a card for turn, and then he's going to go ahead and drop his land for turn. That's going to be Sulphur Falls. He'll tap 2 to cast Helm of Awakening. Now that everybody's spells cost 1 less to play, Jake will drop his land for turn, and then he'll play a Farseek for 1 mana because of the reduced cost. He'll get Ketria Triumph, pass the turn over to Guy, who will drop a basic forest, and then cast a reduced cost Lifecrafter's Bestiary, passing the turn to me. At that point, I'll untap all my mana, draw a card, and drop Ancient Tomb as my land for turn. I'll drop Chrome Mox, imprinting Time Wave onto it so it taps for both of my colors. And then I'll lose 2 life to my Ancient Tomb, filter some mana into my Skycloud Expanse, and I'm going to drop my commander. At that point, I've got no other action, so I'll pass over to Iden. He'll drop a mountain as his land for turn, and then he'll count his mana, tap 3, and play Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. At that point, he'll drop Phyrexian Walker. This will trigger Jhoira, and he'll draw a card. We're keeping track of Storm with this little d20. Then he's going to play his Chrome Mox, imprinting a Force of Negation of all cards onto his Chrome Mox, so it taps for blue. That'll cause him to draw a card off Jhoira. Then he'll use it to cast Ethereum Sculptor. He'll draw another card off Jhoira, and at that point his Storm counts over because he's ending the turn and passing to Jake. Jake's going to draw a card and drop Alchemist Refuge, and he's the next one to cast his Commander ahead of Curve because of the Helm of Awakening. Passing the turn to Guy, he'll untap his mana. He's going to scry. He's going to decide to put that scry all the way to the bottom, then he'll draw his card for turn. At that point, he's going to go ahead and drop a land in Basic Island, and he's going to tap 3 and play Kadena Slinking Sorcerer. Then he'll use Kadena's ability to drop a morph card for free. That's going to cause him to draw a card, triggering Xyris. Moving on to my 4th turn, I'll draw a card, and then I'm going to play Manamo, School at Water's Edge as my land for turn. I'll head into combat and hit Iden with my commander for 5 damage. This will trigger Ojutai, and I'll take Muddle the Mixture off the trigger. Then I'll play Mystic Remora, and at that point I'm just going to pass the turn to Iden. Now keep in mind every extra card drawn this turn will trigger Jake's Xyris. Iden's going to tap 1 and cast a reduced cost Foundry Inspector. That's going to trigger his Jhoira. He'll draw an extra card, and at that point he's going to tap some more mana and try to cast Aetherflux Reservoir. Now anyone who plays Commander knows that this card's basically a shotgun, so I think I have a response. I'm going to go ahead and count out some mana and tap for 3 blue, and I'll filter and float 1 white, casting Cryptic Command to bounce Jhoira and counter Aetherflux Reservoir. This does end up resolving. Then Iden will go ahead and drop a Basic Island as his land for turn, and I'll tap for 3 to redeploy the Jhoira. Fortunately, that taps him out. He'll drop Isochron Scepter with no imprint. That's going to trigger his Jhoira. He'll draw a card. Mind you, I'm drawing a card for every single card he plays off Mystic Remora as well. He drops Sentinel Totem, triggering everything. People draw cards, we make snakes. At that point, he's going to drop Everflowing Chalice. It is going to be for 1 because his spells have reduced cost. At that point, we'll all draw our cards. He's going to play a Spellskite for free, and that's not going to trigger Remora, but both Jake and Iden will draw a card. At that point, Aiden's going to try to cast Mystic Forge. That actually winds up resolving. So we're all going to draw our cards. Me, Aiden, and Jake's going to make a snake. And at that point, Aiden's going to play off the top of his library a copy of Engineered Explosives, triggering everything once again. After that, Aiden's going to decide it's time to deploy Mox Amber. With that on the stack, I decide it's time to respond with Swords to Plowshares targeting Jhoira. This does resolve, bringing Aiden back up to 37. After all of this resolves, Jake's going to make sure he has the right amount of snakes, Aiden's going to rezone his commander into the command zone, and then it's going to be good for Jake to untap his lands and draw his card for turn. Jake's going to drop a copy of City of Brass as his land for turn, then he's going to tap for 3 mana, 1 too many because Helm of Awakening's still out. He's going to drop Phyrexian Altar. At that point, he's going to move straight into combat and attack Guy with his commander. This is going to trigger his commander, and they're both going to draw 3 cards. He's also going to ship 16 snakes in at Aiden. Aiden will block 4 of them and take 12. After drawing all the cards, Jake's going to go ahead and make some more snakes. Moving right along to Jake's second main phase, he's going to put that Phyrexian Altar to use and sacrifice one of the snakes to play a Soul Ring. Then he'll sacrifice another snake in conjunction with Soul Ring to play Kadama's Reach, getting 2 basics, one into play tapped and one into his hand. He's going to go ahead and grab a copy of Basic Forest into play tapped, and a copy of Island to go into his hand. At that point, he's going to go ahead and cast Sylvan Library, and this is going to trigger my Mystic Remora for the second time this turn actually. I couldn't be any happier to draw a card, although every time I draw a card, Jake is making a snake, which is a bit of a toxic relationship to have at this point in the game. But once we get past that point, Jake's going to sack some more snakes to play Magus of the Wheel, and he'll decide that's enough for 1 turn. Believe it or not, we're only moving to Guy's 4th turn, so he's going to scry to the bottom using his Lifecrafter's Bestiary, play a Twilight Mire as his land for turn, and then use Kadena to drop a Morph. That's going to trigger his commander, he's going to draw a card, and then Jake's going to get to make another snake. At that point, Guy's going to go to discard and pass the turn to me. Moving right along to my 5th turn, I'll untap and choose not to play the cumulative upkeep cost for Mystic Remora. Then I'll drop a Sea of Clouds as my land for turn and head right into combat, hitting Jake for 5 commander damage. This is going to trigger my commander, and I'll take a Dovin's Veto off of its trigger. At that point, we'll move into my second main phase, and I'm going to count out some mana. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have at least 5 with 2 white, and then I'm going to cast a pretty important spell this game, Austere Command. I'm going to choose to destroy all artifacts and all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less. Guy thinks about it, and he does have a response. He'd like to flip up a card that he has face down. It's going to be the Survivalist. He wants to destroy Jake's Sylvan Library. After getting this board state cleaned up and making sure we get rid of all those creatures and those artifacts, including my own, I'm going to go ahead and move to cast another spell. It's going to be Sword of Light and Shadow. I'll lose 2 to my Ancient Tomb. Then, before I can pass, I have to discard, so I'll discard 3 cards and pass the turn over to Aiden. With his board state looking pretty broken compared to last turn, Aiden's going to go ahead and draw a card and play Bloodstained Mire as his land for turn. He'll immediately fetch for a basic mountain. At that point, he's going to go ahead and cast Fabricate and get a very strange card in the situation. He's going to go grab a copy of Elixir of Immortality. All of us kind of look at him a little weird as he passes the turn over to Jake. Jake's going to untap all of his mana, play an island for turn, and then he's going to deploy a copy of Swiftfoot Boots and go to attach it immediately to his commander. At that point, he's going to head directly into combat and hit Guy for 3 more commander damage. Triggering his commander, he's going to make some snakes and draw some cards. Moving along to his second main phase, he'll take 1 to City of Brass and cast Winds of Change. At this point, Aiden's hand's pretty broken up, so he's going to let it resolve. Me and Guy are both pretty much tapped out, so we're going to draw a fresh new set of cards equal to the cards we had to begin with. After all that resolves, Jake's going to make a ton of snakes and try to resolve another wheel, the Wheel of Fortune. Aiden decides he really likes his hand, so he's going to go ahead and cast Flusterstorm, countering the wheel twice. At that point, Jake will pass the turn to Guy. After untapping, Guy will drop a basic Swamp as his land for turn, then he's going to tap out for a copy of Seaborn Muse. He'll use Kadena to morph a card face down, drawing a card, triggering the snake, so he makes another snake. Then he's going to go into combat and vigorously attack Aiden for 3 commander damage. Aiden obviously can't block, so he takes it. After that point, he discards 2 cards and passes the turn to me, and when I untap, so does Guy. After drawing my card for turn, I'll move into my main phase 1, and I'll drop Command Tower as my land for turn. Then I'm going to lose 2 left to my Ancient Tomb to try to equip my Ojutai with Sword of Light and Shadow. This winds up resolving, we head into combat and attack Aiden for 7 commander damage. Triggering Ojutai and Sword, we're going to buy back Weathered Wayfarer, we're going to trigger Ojutai, and we're going to take Dovin's Veto again after having it wheeled before. Then we're going to move into our second main phase, and we are actually going to tap a mana and cast the Weathered Wayfarer. At that point, I think we're all set, so we'll discard Plains and pass to Aiden. Aiden's going to untap and draw his card for turn, and then he's going to go ahead and drop a copy of Trinket Mage. He's going to get to search his library for a 1-drop artifact, and he ends up going with Mana Vault. Then he'll pay 1 mana to cast it, and that's all he has for turn, so he passes the turn right back over to Jake. After untapping and drawing a card for turn, he'll drop Scavenger Grounds as his land for turn. head into combat and hit Guy for 3 more commander damage, bringing him to 31. That'll trigger his commander, he'll make 3 snakes, they'll both draw 3 cards, and at that point he'll go to discard a mountain and pass the turn to Guy. Guy's going to start by drawing a card and playing Morphic Pool, then he's going to tap 3 mana to play Vivian, Champion of the Wilds. I don't like him building his own copy of Prophet of Kruphix, so I'll Dovin's Veto the Vivian. At that point Guy will tap 2 more mana and cast a Talisman. Then he's going to go ahead and morph off of his commander, drawing a card and triggering Jake's commander. Guy's going to head into combat at this point, and he thinks he wants to attack me with all 3 of his creatures. He's missing some vital information. I have the School at Water's Edge up, so I use it to untap my commander and block Seedborn Muse. That's a bit of a womp, but it does destroy his Seedborn Muse, and I take 5, including 3 commander damage. Guy goes to discard and passes the turn to me. After drawing my card for turn, I'll head into my main phase and play an island as land for turn. Then I'll lose 2 life to try to cast Conqueror's Flail with my Ancient Tomb. Jake has a pretty terrifying response. He'll tap some mana and activate Alchemist Refuge, allowing him to flash out a copy of Goblin Bombardment, which is pretty horrifying considering his board state. Then I'll move to equip my Conqueror's Flail to Ojutai, and not wanting to piss off Jake, I think I'll just hit Iden for lethal commander damage at this point. I'll trigger Sword and gain 3 life, and then trigger Ojutai. I'll take Teferi Time Raveler off the trigger. Moving right along to my second main phase, I'm going to tap some mana because I think I want to cast that Teferi Time Raveler. Jake does have a response. With Teferi on the stack, he decides he's going to sack 1 snake and deal a damage to me, and after showing that he can do that, he decides to do it a grand total of 25 more times, bringing me down to 7. At that point, my Teferi is going to resolve. And then after some deliberation, I decide to minus Teferi to bounce his Swiftfoot Boots. At that point, I'll use my last available mana to cast Path to Exile on his commander. That path will exile his commander, he'll rezone it to the command zone, he'll get a basic forest into play tapped, and with that being all I have for my turn, Jake will go ahead and untap. Now on his upkeep, he's going to shoot my Teferi with his Goblin Bombardment using a snake. That'll allow him to pay 2 life and cast Noxious Revival. He's going to get Phyrexian Altar and put that right back on top of his deck so he can draw it as his card for turn. At that point, he's going to move into his first main phase and drop Cascade Bluffs as his land for turn. He'll tap some mana, and I'll drop that Phyrexian Altar yet again. At that point, he's going to sacrifice some snakes, and he's going to count himself some mana. His intentions are to cast his commander yet again, leaving 3 mana untapped, which is no good as he's going to lose a life to cast his Swiftfoot Boots, and then he'll equip the boots to the Xyris. This will have him heading into combat, and he'll attack me for 3. With no blocks, I drop down to 4, I draw 3 cards, as does Jake, and Jake's going to make himself some snakes. Now at this point, Jake could actually kill me if he wanted to, but he has different plans. He's going to sacrifice 2 snakes to play Cryptolith Rite and pass to Guy. Before Guy takes his turn, he'd like to flip face up his Den Protector. With that, he'll buy back his Survivalist and put it into his hand, and then we'll move on to Guy's turn. Guy's going to keep a pretty low profile and untap all of his cards and play a basic forest as his land for turn. Then he'll morph a card, and Jake will actually forget to make a snake off of his commander. At that point, Guy passes the turn over to me. Now I nearly draw my card for turn here, but I do realize that I should probably cast a spell before I do so. So I cast Enlightened Tutor with 1 white mana, getting Fire Streaker to the top of my library, and then I'll draw that. Moving to my first main phase, I'll cast Sigarda's Aid, and then I'll try to move straight into combat. It'll work and I'll hit Jake with my commander. Now before we can go to damage, he's going to sacrifice both of his creatures to the Bombardment and deal 2 damage to me, bringing me down to 2. Before we can go to combat damage, I'll flash in Fire Shrieker using Sigarda's Aid, and I'll attach it to my Ojutai. That'll be 18 damage if you include Double Strike off of Ojutai. Then I'll take Arcane Denial and a copy of Cyclonic Rift off of Ojutai's triggers and gain 6 from the sword. Before I can pass, Guy flips Brine Elemental, so I'll lose 2 to Ancient Tomb, and single target Cyclonic Rift his face down morph creature. It's going to wind up being something not so relevant. I was hoping it was the creature that allows him to flip his Brine Elemental back down. It wasn't. So Guy is going to untap and draw his card for turn. At that point, he'll morph a creature face down, which will allow him to draw a card, and then he's just going to flip it up. It's going to be an Ice Feather Aven, which he uses to bounce my Weathered Wayfarer. At that point, Guy actually has lethal. He just comes in with the team, and that leaves Guy as our winner for today's game.
That was a pretty wildly fast game of Magic. In the game itself, I remember it feeling like it took till like turn 11 or 12, you know, your typical Commander game. But it wound up wrapping up on turn 8, and really the writing was all on the walls by the end of turn 7. Let's just go over some of the decks, how they did, maybe highlight some stuff that wasn't obvious, or maybe it was totally obvious to some of you. I just like to wrap up the games and do a little wrap-up at the end of the video, I guess. Not a very original idea, but I've got some comments from people saying they enjoy it, so we're going to keep doing that.
We'll start off with decks we've seen before, because we can kind of base their performances today on past performances. I'll just go ahead and start with my deck. It's Ojutai. The deck's not anything phenomenal. It's just a Voltron build based around a commander that gives you card advantage. I really liked what my deck did that game. I probably could have played a little more optimally on like the last 3 turns of the game, but it was a pretty complicated game. We actually messed up life totals. In real life, I caught the mess ups in the edit, and it didn't ruin the game at all. The game ended up the same way. But some plays could have been made differently had the life totals been tracked a little bit better. So that's something we're going to have to work on a little bit more in the future. But yeah, Dragonlord Ojutai, very Voltron-y, kill everybody. I really like building that commander that way. It was like one of my first commander decks, so I'm super stoked that I still get to play it. And it can kind of keep up. This pod wasn't the most high power level pod, except for one of them. We'll talk about that in a moment. But that was cool. And then another deck, that might be the one of them, is, you've seen it before, it's Jhoira, the Weatherlight Captain. Iden probably would have won that game if it weren't for the austere command. He was set up so well that he was likely just going to go grab his copy of, Sensei's Divining Top. And Sensei's Divining Top plus Mystic Forge equals draw your whole deck, and he plays Grape Shot, and he can play like Paradoxical Outcome and stuff. There's just a billion ways for him to win the game once he like has access to his whole deck. A lot of you have probably seen Jhoira decks. There are really cool budget ways to build this deck. That's not what we see here. We've got your Force of Wills, your Force of Negations, Pact of Negation, your Sensei's Divining Top, your insanely expensive lands. He's got everything. But the interesting thing about Jhoira is when you build it with that huge budget, that $1,000 to $1,500 budget, it's like definitely better than a budget version in terms of power level. But I was surprised to see just what the budget versions can do as well. That's something I'd go check out. Maybe go check out Mitch from the Commander's Quarter. He has a budget version of Jhoira. Surprisingly powerful. Anyway, most of you have probably seen Jhoira decks, but it was really impressive what his deck did. On turn 4, his board state looked very much like something you might see on turn 10 from most decks. He was able to storm off with his Helm of Awakening, and we'll get to Helm of Awakening in a moment because it actually changed the tempo of that game in general. Moving into some new decks. We'll talk about the Victor last. So we'll talk about Jake's new deck, which you'll see a lot of. It is his Xyris Writhing Storm. That commander's so cool. It's one of the most unique effects I've ever seen. Jokingly, a lot of people in the community call it Snekusar, because it's doing that thing where it's like, hey, you're my friends, draw cards with me. And it helps your opponents draw cards. But in return, you make like an absurd amount of bodies. There's ways to abuse that. We'll have a deck tech on that coming soon. Maybe we'll start including deck lists in the description, just so you guys can take a peep at what everyone's doing. But he has cards like Goblin Bombardment, which you saw. He also has like Impact Tremors. Obviously, you saw the Phyrexian Altar. He's got a billion ways to abuse these bodies. In the Web of War was something he didn't cast this game, but like, if he has in the Web of War, he's able to generate a ton of damage in one turn and kind of one-shot people. So that's kind of his response to his old Nekusar deck that he was getting a little bored of. It was to build like a deck like Nekusar, but a bit more unique. And you'll be seeing more of this deck in the future. So if you liked it, stay tuned. We'll have a lot more videos with the Xyris. I hope that's how you pronounce it. Xerox. Whatever his name is. That guy. He's going to be on the channel more. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about Guy's deck. Guy, like the rest of us, played his commander ahead of curve because of the Helm of Awakening. All of us had our commanders out on like turn 4 at the latest. Maybe it was turn 3 at the latest. I think all of us had our commanders out on turn 3, which is kind of wild. Guy's deck is by far the cheapest deck at the table. All of us are playing with decks that have around $1,000 budget. I think the Xyris deck is closer to like $900 based off what I know about the build. Ojutai is like right at that $1,000 mark, and half of it's just because of the versions in the deck. If I like took my Judge promo swords out of it and stuff, it'd probably be like a $900 deck. And then Iden's deck's like 1,500 bones. Guy's playing a deck that's shy of $200 because we all built budget decks. But Guy felt that his budget deck was powerful enough to hang in this pod. And if you look at the way the game developed, it really wasn't. It didn't do anything overwhelmingly powerful relative to the other decks in the pod. But it did this really cool thing that a lot of the decks that are the worst deck in the pod do, where it doesn't get targeted. That's why a lot of people are playing the worst deck gets second, because they lose last. So Guy did this thing where he wasn't targeted. He even drew extra cards off of Jake, hitting him with his commander in order to trigger and get more snakes. And because of that, Guy was able to sit back and watch me, Jake, and Iden punch each other's teeth out. And then when all the dust settled, he saw me sitting there at 6 life.
and he got me. And that's how you do that, by the way, on a budget. You watch all of your opponents who are playing these absurd game plans just kind of kill each other, and then you kill the last guy. So maybe the person with the worst deck doesn't always get second. Maybe the person with the worst deck just plays carefully and, red shells the person in first, and then wins the game, which is pretty sweet. But yeah, that's all I have to say about today's game. I hope you guys liked the decks. And a little thing, I know some of you were actually watching to the end because of my comment section, which I do appreciate. And I just wanted to shout out, I don't have a list of names, but I've been getting some really, what's the word for it? Some very constructive criticism from some new subscribers. And if you are you and you know who you are, thank you very much. This channel needs it. This is something I really enjoy doing, but I'm still quite a bit new to. So big thanks for everyone that's throwing out all the criticisms and just people with kind words. How would everyone feel about maybe some 60 card gameplay? Maybe over on Twitch, or maybe I could upload the highlights here. That's something I do. I play a lot of Magic recreationally, like competitive Magic recreationally, and on Arena primarily, and some Magic the Gathering Online. And I'm hanging out in Mythic on Arena right now. I'm wondering, hey, I'm really enjoying the Historic format. Maybe some people would just like some videos of like 3 best of 3 games of Historic all jammed into a video. Because I want to do daily uploads eventually, but doing Commander gameplay videos daily is a tall order. These things take at least 2 days to get fully prepared. So let me know what you think about that. That said, I think I've rambled on long enough. This video is probably well over the 20-minute mark, which probably isn't a bad thing, but who am I to make that call? Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.